This morning's scripture reading comes from 1 John chapter 3, verse 16 through 18. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. How does God's love abide in anyone who has world goods and see a brother and sister in need and yet refuse to help? Little children, let us love, not in words or speech, but in truth and actions. So again, I would like to thank you for another opportunity to stand before you this morning and speak to you for a little while on the subject, a romantic gesture of Jesus' unconditional love. You know, before I start all of my messages, I have some poetry for you. So this morning I have a short poem. It's called The Lord's Love and Protection, and it's by Teresa C. Howes. The Lord's loves and protections are never so far away that he cannot reach us wherever we are. His arm outreach like an eagle's wing, ever hovering with the love and care he brings. Enlightened by his strength and comforting power, we may rest and be assured every day and every hour. This morning, again, the subject for the morning is a romantic gesture of Jesus' unconditional love. Some of us may be wondering why the title of this message is a romantic gesture of Jesus' unconditional love. So I want to give you a definition of romance. Some of you all think romance is some pretty boy sweeping you off your feet, or some girl who cooking dinner for you and make you feel good that she take care of you and all that stuff. But I just want to give you the definition that I found in one of the dictionaries that I was looking for. It said romance, a feeling of excitement and mystery associated with love. Isn't that what our relationship with Jesus is all about, excitement and mystery? Of why Jesus would lay down his life for all of humanity when some of humanity rejected him. So I feel like Jesus had a romantic gesture of unconditional love for us. Even though we didn't treat him the way we expect him to treat us, he still laid down his life that we might have a right to life. Last Sunday, Pastor Sheila talked about her subject was what love has to do with it. Most of you all can relate to that because you like Tina Turner. But I just want to tell you that love has everything to do with it. So I'm going to paint you an extended picture of what love has to do with it through my message, a romantic gesture of Jesus' unconditional love. Last Sunday, Pastor Sheila asked the question, what love has to do with it? This week, again, I'm offering you an extended picture and an answer to that love has everything to do with it. First, let us look at her message and see what she gleaned from what love has to do with it. First, she said, love has to do with decency, dignity, and respect for others. Then she said, love helps us to see the humanity in others. Then she said, let us give the best we have to Jesus and to others. Love keeps us in the presence of Jesus. And finally, love helps us not to judge our neighbors. You know, the person who maybe don't cut their lawn as swiftly as they should, or the person who park his car just enough in your driveway where you can't get out? Those are the people that we need to show this unconditional love to, because maybe they're not doing it to aggravate us. Maybe they're just doing it because they're not paying attention, because they have so much stuff weighing on them. But just last week was Valentine's Day. You know, person showed up with the roses and the cards and the chocolate and all that good stuff for our lovers. Some of us cooked and had dinner by candlelight. Some of us made grand gestures by getting down on one knee and proposing marriage to our prospective loved one. And others fought large crowds and crowded restaurants to romance their loved ones, their partner, or the one that they love. But some of our grand gestures are simply not enough, because real love is based on action and not just speech and feeling. The greatest act of love is giving of oneself in service to others and not expecting anything in return. If we only show our grand gesture of love on Valentine, or when we think everyone is looking and wondering what are we going to do next, and not make sacrifices for others, then we are not following Jesus' teachings or his grand gesture of unconditional love. Jesus' grand gesture of unconditional love for us is always available to us 365 days a year. Even though we sometimes fail to act like we love him, or we think we don't deserve it. This reminds me of a story. You know, I always have a story when I come up here about when I was growing up. This reminds me of a story. When I was a teenager growing up in New Orleans, Louisiana, I was in junior high school, or middle school as it's known today. This girl, she was the prettiest girl in my 8th grade class. I had a huge crush on her. I would not name her to protect the innocent, but my friends knew of my planned romantic gesture. But it wasn't enough. She only saw me as a friend. I was put in the friend zone. You know, nobody wants to be put in the friend zone. This is not where a young romantic wants to be, but I learned a very valuable lesson that we can't expect others to feel as we do, but accepting things we cannot change is freedom from all the anger that can weigh on us and make us bitter. I also relate this to Jesus' romantic gesture of unconditional love to save humanity. Because even though some of humanity rejected him, he was still obedient to his Father's will to save us and give us the right to life. This love can't be bought or earned by church work. It can only be accepted by giving our lives to Christ and to love God with all our heart and soul and all our might, and love our neighbors as ourselves. But some of us are not capable of loving our neighbors because we are not capable of loving ourselves. This is why we have such a hard time accepting Jesus' romantic gesture of unconditional love for us. But as an example, Jesus showed his unconditional love by laying down his life for us, even though we didn't do anything to deserve it. Because Jesus' romantic gesture of unconditional love is real and not just for one day. Are you willing to lay down your life for a friend or foe? But as an example, Jesus showed us unconditional love by laying down his life for us, even though we didn't do anything to deserve it. Because Jesus' romantic gesture of unconditional love is real and not just for one day. Are you willing to lay down your life for a friend and a foe? This is hard. This is a hard question to answer because it's easy to put yourself in harm's way for a loved one. All we have to do is ask the parents, the mothers and fathers and grandparents and guardians who are here today. They understand what I'm talking about, but would you do it for somebody who treated you the way some of humanity treated Jesus? I'm not speaking of dying or putting yourself in danger when I speak of laying down your life for someone, but would you speak kindly of someone who rejected you or done you wrong? Would you make a recommendation for that same person who wronged you to get a job? Would you help that person if they were in need? Would you visit them in the hospital or offer to take care of their family if there was an emergency that came up and they weren't your personal friend or family? Remember, this would allow love to be an action and not just fluff. Remember the scripture in verse 18 that speaks of love as not just speech, but action. You know, true love is always about action and truth, not just saying, I love you. Please remember, love doesn't hurt, but it can be painful. When we don't treat our loved ones with dignity and respect. I'm going to say that again. Remember, love does not hurt, but it can be painful when we don't treat our loved ones with dignity and respect. Just because somebody tells you they love you doesn't give you the right to mistreat them. Just because somebody tells you they love you, it doesn't give you the right to go out and say whatever you want to say because you think that person loves you and they're going to forgive you no matter what. Just because someone says they love you, it doesn't give you the right to not treat that person with dignity and not treat that person with respect. God's unconditional love for us is based on the fact that he wanted to give his life to all of humanity, not just the humanity who was standing in the street screaming, Hosea, Hosea in the higher. Not just to the people that followed him, the 12 disciples, not just to the people who honored him when he went to their house, but he gave his life for even those who decided and screamed, crucify him. Unconditional love has no strings attached. You either love because it's the right thing to do. You don't love because you think you're going to get something in return. Unconditional love is a commitment to our loved ones. It's not selfish or boastful. It's pleasing in God's sight. Therefore, we must love one another as God has loved us. Unconditional love helps us to understand each other and helps us to do what is right in the eyesight of God and each other. The word I love you has become so commonplace it had either become a hello when you walk in the door or goodbye when you walk out the door. People just say, I love you, just to say I love you. And that's nice to tell people that you love them. But there need to be some action behind that love. That person, you don't need to tell a person I love you and then go home and call your friend and say, I went over to so-and-so house and she didn't even offer me a cup of coffee. But you told her you love her when you left the door. Or you told him you love him when you left the door. I went over to her house. I told her I hadn't had lunch. You think she would have took the time to fix me a sandwich or something? But I love you when you walk out the door, you said, I love you. Are you really just saying I love you because it become a pet saying and pet response? Or do you truly love that person because God say we must love our neighbors as ourselves? The two commandments that instruct us, they say the most important commandments is love the Lord thy God with all your heart and all your might, and love your neighbor as yourself. So if you're not capable of loving your neighbor, you're certainly not capable of loving yourself, because God left that instructions for us. And God said, love your neighbor as yourself. That means that you wouldn't do anything to that person that you wouldn't do to yourself. That means if you didn't have time to fix somebody a cup of coffee or lunch because they came over to visit you, then you shouldn't call the next person and say, girl, don't go over to so-and-so house, a man, don't go over to so-and-so house because I was hungry. I had to end up going to the restaurant after I left there. And then all she wanted to do was talk, talk, talk. My stomach was growling, and I wasn't in the mood. But I stayed there anyway because I was supposed to stay there and do this. And besides, I want my crown. When I get to heaven, I want God to tell me that I visited the sick. And I took care and visited the people in the hospital. I want my crown. But in order to gain your crown, you must gain love in your heart. You must love one another as Jesus loved us. You must love the person even if you got a different view, even if your politics don't line up. Even if they marry somebody who you think is the worst person in the world, you still have to love your neighbor as yourself. Even if the person didn't treat you the way you thought you should be treated. Because I just knew the prettiest girl in the 8th grade class was going to accept my romantic gesture. Because after all, it was me. I was making the romantic gesture. But I found out that all she wanted was a friend. And probably her parents wouldn't let a 14-year-old girl date anybody anyway. But at the time, I just didn't understand and didn't feel that. But I grew to understand that love is the one thing that can get us past all of the hate and all of the craziness and all of the things that's going on in this world, if we can just show love for one another and mean that we love one another and show the person that we care for them by going visiting people in the hospital. This reminds me, Deb Lee and myself, we are working on a visitation ministry. Pastor Sheila cannot go and see everybody at every point. But people in need want to see their First Baptist family. We have a sign-up sheet out in the foyer by the office. If you have any time to visit or go and visit with people that need visitation, please sign up for the visitation ministry. We're going to have a training, and we're going to have rules. And the first rule is that we must love one another as God has loved us. So you all going to get out real early today because the pastor not here, but I'm simply going to leave you with 3 points about unconditional love and what it has meant to me to learn how to love unconditionally. Now, I don't always be successful at this, and you are not always going to be successful at it. But if you practice loving unconditional, if you practice loving without expectations, if you practice loving your neighbor as you love yourself, if you practice showing people that you love them versus just telling them that you love them, if you practice. Now, bad practice make bad habits. So when you practice love, you have to practice love in a practical way so that when your practice manifests itself, it manifests itself in a good way. So the next time you tell somebody you love them, or the next time you think about telling somebody that you love them, make sure that you truly love them and that you're not just saying that because they expected to hear it or you expect to say it. Practice love. Practice honoring your loved one. Practice making sure that they have what they need to understand that love is unconditional. And, you know, the greatest thing you can do for yourself and the greatest thing you can do for others to show them that you love them is practice forgiveness. You know that saying people say, I'll forgive them, but I ain't going to forget it. Well, you might as well not forgive them if you're not going to forget it, because the reality is every time you not forget it, the hate borrows back up in you, and it pushes the love to the side. So, now, I'm not telling you that you need to go out and run a marathon with the person that hurt you. I'm simply saying that you don't need to drive your blood pressure up. Because I guarantee you the person that you're hating on is going about their life and not even thinking about you. Because if they was thinking about you, they wouldn't have did what they did to you to start with. So love is practical. Love is action. Unconditional love is like I was telling the kids. It's like you know how you have your dog and the dog can't wait for you to come home from work? Sometimes they know you get home at 4 o'clock, they be at the door waiting for you. That's unconditional love. We have the same ability as humans to have unconditional love for each other. We just got to let all of the garbage get out of the way. We just got to let all the petty things that drive us away from each other, put it on the side, get it out of the way. So when I tell you forgive a person, I truly mean forgive that person. I mean, don't tell a person you forgive them and then go tell your friend, girl, you know I don't forgive her. You know what she did to me. You're not really. So you just said that so the person could not think that you're mad with them. But so be upfront with the person. Let the person know, sister so-and-so, that really hurt me what you said about my child or my family, my husband, my spouse. But you know, I love you enough to set that on the side. And we're going to sit down and talk about it. And maybe you could tell me some of the reasons why you dislike my loved one. And you'll find out that once you set all that stuff aside, you won't have to take as many high blood pressure pills as you take. You won't have to be worried about if you're going to have a heart attack, if you're going to get a few more gray strands of hair in your head. So unconditional love is this thing that we have in our heart for each other. All we have to do is tap into it and rely on it and not let these little small things that send us on a different course get in our way. So I'll leave you with 3 points this morning with unconditional love. Know that Jesus' romantic gesture is nothing like what you ever experienced here on earth. It's all about how he showed us that love is action and not just speech. So you can't just tell a person you love them. You have to put some action behind that. You can't just say, I love you, and you know the person about to be evicted, and you have the means to help the person, and you don't help them because you said they was too lazy and they should have paid their own rent or whatever it is that you're trying to help the person with. Didn't do you any good to go over to the person's house to offer to help them if you had no intention of helping them before you went there. So know that Jesus' romantic gesture is nothing like what you have experienced here on earth. It's all about how you show us, how he showed us that love is an action and not just speech. Know that in order to maintain a romantic gesture like Jesus did for us, we must keep a strong relationship with God on behalf of each other. And that means talking to each other. Talking is the key to maintaining your relationship with Jesus and not just showing up on Sunday morning. In other words, when you was courting her, you had to talk to her. When you was courting him, you had to talk to him. But if you married a person, then you stop talking to him, what happens to your relationship? It disintegrates because you're no longer doing what it took to get the person. So don't start anything in the beginning of the relationship that you're not willing to continue for the next however many years you have here on earth. You know, I made the mistake of cooking dinner for Pastor Sheila. When we first got married, 35 years later, I'm still cooking dinner. But I don't say it was a mistake, but I enjoy cooking. But I'm just saying, I couldn't, because I used to work then, and I would still come home and fix dinner. So the reality is I couldn't say I'm tired. You know, I work harder now, so therefore you got to fix dinner. I decided to fix dinner, so whatever it takes to get her, that's what it takes to keep her. But that's also unconditional love, that you take the time to do what it is necessary. That's why when we do that anniversaries and birthdays in this church, that they have so many people can stand up and say, I've been married for 57 years. I've been married for 64 years. I've been married for X amount of years. Is because they are doing what is necessary to show the person that they love them. And finally, know that Jesus' romantic gesture is not just to sweep you off your feet for a day, but it's a commitment for a lifetime. All you have to do is accept this grand gesture of unconditional love Jesus has for us. And as I come to a close this morning, remember that love is one's ability to love one another as God still loves us. May God bless you, and may God bless your family. Thank you.